Okay, welcome back, everyone. Time to talk politics. Our political brain trust is in attendance right now. Liberal John Elliott and conservative Joseph Perkins. Gentlemen,
hi,
welcome.
How are you?
Okay, I'm well, thank you. Let's begin by talking about the debt ceiling. Now, before all of you reach for your remote and people's eyes glaze over, why should people care about the debt ceiling? I mean, it's been likened to the credit card limit of the United States, but why should our viewers pay attention to this?
Here's the reason. Average household in San Diego, $225,000. That's your share of the national debt. That's how much you owe. And that's why it should be important to them, because if your government is spending $225,000 of your tax dollars in one area, that means that's less for them to spend in another area that's more important to you, like stimulating job creation. We heard about the housing downturn and the like. And so that's why it's important to the lay public.
John?
Well, there's two things here. I think it's really important to know there's two distinct things. There's the debt ceiling, and then there's the deficit, and they have to be talked about in different issues. The deficit is basically the revolving line, the budget that we use every month, that we spend every month. And Joseph's team has done a marvelous job of blurring the issues and of pretending they're both the same, and they're not. The debt ceiling is the international limits that Congress allows the United States to borrow, and it's really the international world that looks at us and says, okay, here's what we're willing to do. We're willing to lend you this amount of money. So when people lend you money, Mark, whether it's a bank or friends and family, they're looking at your collateral, your capabilities, and your character, and of course what you're going to do with the money.
Right.
And if anybody's willing to lend you $1 million, $2 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion, they got a lot of faith in you. So what we have is an enormous amount of faith. The world has a lot of faith in the capabilities of the United States and in the future of the United States. And I'm pretty proud of that. And now we have his team. We have McConnell and Boehner that are tying strings to the deficit, and they're blurring the issues here, and they want all sorts of cuts.
So let's bring everybody up to date. For those of you who may have missed the headlines, essentially the administration right now, the White House is saying that if Timothy Geithner included, if the debt ceiling is not raised, the United States could begin defaulting on its debts this summer.
Internationally.
The Republicans are saying that they're not going to wholesale support any of this unless there are some cuts and some reforms that are made.
Some real deficit reduction, meaningful deficit reduction. You know, this issue first became politicized back in March of 2006. That's when George W. Bush tried to raise the debt ceiling, and Democrats en masse voted against it, including the current president, who's now saying we need to raise the debt limit. And so that's what touched off the politicization of something that used to be routine for presidents, Republican or Democrat. The debt ceiling was routinely raised.
Yeah,
but in March
69 times since 1961.
In 2006, the Democrat minority in the Senate decided we're going to send a message to George W. Bush, and it's been politicized ever since then. The reality is this: we have a structural deficit problem in our country, which has contributed to a national debt that has soared far beyond any of our imagination. Not to mention, I mean, it's more than $14 trillion right now. And the plan that's being put forward by this president and by Democrats in the Senate, it will come nowhere near to solving that debt problem anytime in the next 10 years, 12 years. And that's the reality.
The thing, though, I have to believe that a lot of our viewers who have been keeping up with the story would want to know, though, that if the Republicans truly indeed that the United States could begin defaulting internationally on some of its debts, isn't it a game of chicken? Would the Republicans really let that happen?
You know what? We will not quietly perish. It's not going to happen. There are all sorts of maneuverings that the Treasury Secretary can do between now and the time that happens. Yeah, there is a drop-dead date, and I don't think that they're going to let us default on our debt. But unless you have the pressure of having to raise the debt ceiling, there's absolutely no way that we're ever going to see meaningful deficit reduction.
John? Well, wait a minute. The deficit reduction should be, you see, you're blurring it too. You're talking deficit reduction and you're talking debt ceiling.
We need yearly deficit reduction to get to debt reduction.
Deal with the deficit reduction when you talk about budget issues. That's when we talk about spending cuts. Right now they're tying spending cuts and deficit issues to the debt ceiling, and that's economic terrorism. That's exactly what that is. The people that don't believe that we're going to hit a drop-dead date and the world's going to have a serious financial problem are the same type of people that get eaten by bears.
Okay, let's before we run out of time, let's talk about gas prices and some maneuverings that have been happening in Washington. Senate Republicans halted a bill that would have taken away multi-billion-dollar tax breaks for oil companies.
$2 billion a year.
Tomorrow, Democrats are expected to stop a bill that would force Obama's hand on Gulf drilling programs. Is this just symbolic politicking which is going on in the summer season?
No, you've got $2 billion a year. He's just talking about we've got to have tax cuts, we've got to have deficit issues, we've got to do something with the budget. Here's $2 trillion. Here's $2 billion in tax bennies a year, gifts that we're giving to 5 companies that are controlling the entire industry of oil and gas and the exploration in this country. And they show up in Washington last week, and they're indignant about getting these. And they are some of the wealthiest companies in the world. They're showing massive profits, record profits. And my solution to this is that we break them up. We take ExxonMobil, we make it Exxon and Mobil. We take ConocoPhillips, we make it Conoco and Phillips. It hasn't happened to, we did that with AT&T and Verizon, and everybody else seems to be doing so well. And by the way, if that doesn't work, we say, okay, boys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to nationalize one of you. We're not going to tell you which one right now. You got a year to figure it out, and if you don't get your act together, we'll nationalize one of you.
There's less than zero chance of that happening. Here's the reality of the situation, and that is this. The taxes that he's talking about, the tax breaks, don't apply strictly to the oil and gas industry, but industries across the board. So it's very difficult to say we're going to single out this particular industry to get rid of their tax credits and tax breaks while leaving other industries, including the media industry, exempt from that. Here's another piece about this. You know what? Even if we get rid of those breaks for these oil and gas companies, it's not going to make a bit of difference at the pump.
Well, a lot of people think, I mean, we're almost out of time, but a lot of people are frustrated as well at both Republicans and Democrats because both are fighting for these bills, which don't really have a chance of passing from the beginning, and there's just a feeling of posturing when we're all just getting hammered at the gas pump.
Well, this is what I would suggest, and John, maybe you might join me with this. Here's a way we can make an immediate difference tomorrow. Let's have a temporary elimination of the federal gasoline tax, which is 18 cents a gallon, and we can marry that with a reduction in California's state gas tax, which is another 18 cents a gallon. Would you join me on that, John?
Well, so in other words, cut back the revenue that's going into the government at a time when the government is already suffering from lack of revenue.
I would like the people to have it more than the government.
All right, we're out of time, but just one quick note from both of you guys on all of the happenings with Governor Schwarzenegger. Do you anticipate any sort of blowback on the Republican Party, or does this now become more of an entertainment, a personal issue?
It's his issue.
No, there's not going to be any blowback because he's not in office. But I think Republicans and Democrats alike have to say that his conduct was reprehensible, and our hearts go out for Maria Shriver, who was a great first lady. You
got to bleed for Maria. It's really sad.
John
but it's not least bit surprising. The Gropener has been doing that for a long time. We know about that.
John Elliott, Joseph Perkins, thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Catherine.
You guys ended agreeing on something. That was pretty good. Okay.